You know, it's crazy. We start getting to the end of November and early December, and the calls and contacts, especially emails, just come flooding in for people requesting us to come to their site, whether it's Dylan or myself, and design their habitat and hunting plan for them. And it's because they just went through a season, and obviously they had bad hunting. If they had great hunting, then why would you have someone come in and work on your habitat or give you recommendations? Now, some people just want to up their game. You know, they're looking for that next level. We get those a lot too, where they're in one of the Fantasyland states, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, and they are seeing big bucks all the time. They're shooting 160-inch bucks, but they're missing out on those 180s, 190s. And yes, there's places like that. So we go in and try to help them, because the same concepts that help us get those mature bucks, 4 or 5-year-olds here, help someone over there do the same thing. It can almost seem like it's too easy in some of those areas, but when you want to elevate your game and get those upper level bucks and upper tier bucks in those locations, you have to do the same concepts that would help you consistently shoot a 3 or 4-year-old buck somewhere else. So it's all relative. But bad hunting gets us a lot of contacts this time of year, and we love to help. Number one, there's lots of signs that you're not doing that well, or the habitat's bad in your area. But we're going to talk about number one right here. There's no small game. When you have great whitetail habitat, it's like putting a bullseye on the wall, whitetail in the middle. And when you have great whitetail habitat dictates that you have to have diversity and you have to have edge. When you do that and you have diversity and edge, and lots of different types of habitat coming into one spot that attracts and holds a lot of whitetail, you're gonna have a lot of small game, whether it's cottontails. I had snowshoe rabbits up in the UP in Michigan, especially pheasants. You're gonna have songbirds, butterflies, bees during the summertime. You're gonna have a lot of great habitat, and if you don't have any of that, especially when you get in November and December and you don't have rabbits or pheasants or grouse, whatever in your area, then that's a great sign that your habitat is severely lacking, the amount of small game you have. And that's where if you have great small game populations and you have high coyote populations like we do here on this farm in Minnesota, you're gonna find they don't touch a deer that much, just because you simply have lots of small game for them to eat. Could be squirrels, chipmunks, whatever. You have that. We've been saving pallets. We'll create a video on that. That'll be part of our January deer chores, showing us creating that habitat for rabbits and holding cover so they're not getting picked off by predators at a certain percentage during the wintertime. We can improve on those ratios and those odds. So think about your small game populations. If you don't have a lot, if you don't have the cover that dictates good small game coverage, especially pheasants, rabbits, grouse, where appropriate related to your region, then there's probably some areas lacking in your whitetail habitat. Number two, does are tough to pattern. Dylan and I are going out hunting tonight. I'm not gonna say we're gonna see a lot of does, but we're gonna see some does to shoot, whether it's 1, 2, 3, and some fawns. That's the easy part. We know they're hitting those food sources every day. We know they're bedding here because we're not spooking it out, and because we have consistent food and we have adequate cover for the entire season. That's the easy part, and we're leaving it alone. We're not spooking it. That's the basic of a land. If you can't get to that basic, where you can go out and say, I'm gonna shoot a doe tonight, if you want to, just about at will, then there's severe problems taking place on your land. It's either lack of cover, lack of good food, usually both of them combined, but certainly being overpressured and overhunted. Your neighbors really don't have much of an effect on that. Does have a very, very small daylight home range. So when I hear people talking about, I'm just not seeing a deer because my neighbors are shooting everything, it's likely because they have very poor habitat, very poor cover, the person I'm talking to, and that's the main thing. But a lot of times it has to do with our own hunting pressure, whether it's riding ATVs, walking across food plots in the morning, overhunting certain stands, walking through bedding areas, blowing our scent into food sources bedding areas on the way in, the way out, whatever it might be, there's usually that combination. Because does are extremely predictable. They have very short daylight movements from their bedding area to the food source, and you have to almost work hard to mess that up. So if you're having a hard time patterning does, even that oldest, wisest doe on your property, she should even be more dependable, then there's some severe problems taking place. Number three, nocturnal patterns. This is huge. We see this pattern take place over and over again. Where year one, install food plots, hunt the land, maybe you didn't even have time to put food plots in, you have a great hunt. Year two, a little worse. Year three, a little worse. You spend more money, put in more food plots. Year four, even worse. Year five, all of a sudden by 6, 7, that's usually that time period. You look at it and say, this just isn't working. We need to sell the land, buy a new property because something's going on here, and no one blames themselves. But most of the time, I find the more that someone spends on habitat, The more, if those habitat improvements are not built within a cohesive unit of measure of movement like we talk about on these videos, if it's not put in the correct pattern that allows you to actually get on and off the property without spooking deer, then it makes things worse. What happens is the first year the deer are none the wiser. The second year maybe a little bit less, but still, all of a sudden, third, fourth year, those mature bucks know to stay off your property. And what happens is if you have a center of habitat and food and bedding, and it's overpressured, overhunted, food sources in the wrong spot, bedding areas in the wrong spot, and those mature bucks get used to that, they're not going to come on your property during the daylight. And by year 4, 5, 6, they're not coming on your property at night. And when they don't come on your property, they're not avoiding it by 100 yards and just going around this little area. They're avoiding by hundreds of yards or more. If it's in a big wilderness area, wooded area, they're going to be a half mile away or a mile away during the daylight. They're not going to come into your property until middle of the night if they do. But when they recognize your property, 40, 80, even 200 acres, 400 acres, as a center of hunting pressure, they will avoid the entire property during the daylight and you'll have a nocturnal problem. So if you're seeing a lot of mature bucks, if you're getting the majority of your mature bucks after dark, you have a problem. That ratio should be about 50-50. 1-to-1, meaning you're seeing one mature buck after dark, meaning 2-3 hours after dark to 2-3 hours before light, to every buck that's within that 1 to 2 hours around daylight or during daylight. It's not that you're not seeing any bucks after dark. That's not a bad thing. You want them close in and around daylight because that means you're staying close to your land. That means that they relate to your land, they like your cover, they like your food. Obviously, you can't hold 10 mature bucks on 40 acres. The point is to have them be close enough and to recognize your property as a daylight parcel, because there's very, very, very few daylight parcels in the deer habitat neighborhood. And you need to be aware of that. And nocturnal bucks are a great sign, along with these others, that something's wrong. And number 4 here, bad habitat to taxidermy ratio. What do I mean by that? Well, I know that if you're getting a good deer mount, you're going to spend about $600, $650, $700, $550, $800. What is the going rate in your area? If you have a good 40-acre parcel, that should be worth 1 to 2 good bucks on your land every single year. That means you could be spending $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 on taxidermy bills. And if you have 40 acres and 3 acres of plots, you shouldn't be spending that much in deer habitat. I see people that spend $10,000 in deer habitat and don't shoot a deer. $15,000 in deer habitat and don't shoot a deer. And you could tell me, well, we're improving everything. Well, if you're improving everything, the hunt comes along with the improvement. You can't have a great herd without a great hunt. Just because you're spending lots of dollars and you're doing all these great, cool habitat improvements on your land, if you're not getting results and you have that bad taxidermy to habitat ratio, just think about that. If you're not actually shooting bucks, what are you doing? If they're not on your property during the daylight to hunt, then what good is all the habitat dollars you're spending? Results speak for themselves. In that ratio, especially on smaller properties where you're spending, you get to shoot 1 or 2 nice bucks, family members, whoever it is. Those taxidermy bills can be expensive, and on a small property especially, they shouldn't be outweighed by several times by deer habitat improvements. And number 5, the 100-yard Dylanism. What does this mean? Well, Dylan talked about this where I was talking about these points right here, is when you're on a property, we talk about the 100-yard test with a deer blind. Can the deer see your blind from 100 yards away? Now, obviously, even some of our blinds, if they're 150 yards, where we sat last night, my muzzleloader shots would have ranged right around from 181 to 203, and if I shot the other way, it would have been about 215 to 225, 210, right around in there. We're sitting a long ways away. If they can look back and see the blind sticking up above the switchgrass on the knoll in the distance, that doesn't bother them in any way. But when you're within that 100 yards and you can see that blind as plain as day and they can watch you get in and out of it, there's going to be problems. And when you relate that to habitat, if you can walk in the woods during the wintertime and you can see 100 yards or more through the woods, Dylan pointed out that that's not a good thing. And I like going by when there's snow on the ground, because snow allows you to see. I'll go on a property and they'll say, well, the property's pretty thick. We'll talk about habitat, it's a 40, and we can look out the back of the 40 with just 2 inches of snow on the ground. That to me is how deer see when there's no snow on the ground. So think of that when you're walking through your woods. You shouldn't be able to see more than 100 yards. That's why the hills we have are such an advantage here, because as these hills flatten out to benches and then drop back down again to the valleys and bottoms and go around a corner, go around a point or a ridge, then deer can't see each other. When they can't see each other, they feel more compartmentalized. When things are more compartmentalized, whether it's a flat ground, you have lots of thick cover, or you're in hill country around hills and you have the thick cover, then you separate deer, you can put more deer on your property. You're going to find those great November, December deer properties. They're hidden from you, they're hidden from each other, and that's a good thing. That's how you fit more mature bucks on one parcel. So it's a great way to look at your land and make sure that it's not too open. Does your land pass and your habitat pass the 100-yard test? If it doesn't, there's probably some work to do. And we could come up with 5 more, 10 more, 15 more in this area, but wanted to have a short, hard-hitting video for you to analyze your property. I know a lot of you are analyzing your property right now and looking at it hard. That's a great way to look at your land and to plan right now for next year. Address these 5 holes in your land, and you're going to have a great hunt next year. But most importantly, you're going to understand what it takes to actually hold deer and hunt deer on your land, or even go find it on public land in that case too. Good deer habitat has a lot in common. It's thick, it's diverse, it has edge, and of course it has great food and cover, but it's also unpressured. Get all of those to happen in one place on the land you hunt, in the land you hunt. If you create it, build it, they will come, and you'll have a great hunt next year and beyond. Folks, I want to make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be how to hunt the rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to 93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes so that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.